Welcome to Awakened Sovereignty, a solo cast on ascension, shadow work, empowerment, and alignment with your highest purpose. I'm Chris Pinckley, spiritual coach and guide for those moving through deep awakening, transformation, and personal evolution. Let's begin. In this episode, I'm going to discuss the frontrunner soul. And this is a term that I created to describe the path of souls, certain souls on the planet during this time of ascension who have a rather extreme path. Now, an important caveat is that not every episode of my podcast will apply to every person. And so most of the people that listen to this episode probably won't apply, although everyone can get something out of it. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to it, but I'm saying that not every episode of my podcast will apply to every single person. However, again, I do try to make them beneficial to anyone who will listen to them, even if it doesn't necessarily fully apply to you. That said, the frontrunner soul, man, if there was a path that, as a soul before you incarnate that you choose, this is the one I would recommend the least for people. I recommend the least. It's one of the ones I signed on for, and it quite likely they are the sort of chosen elect, the 144,000 souls that will activate the light grid on the planet. This at least is my theorem or my working theory on these folks. Many of them have already had heart activation, which is, I believe it is the goal of the frontrunner soul is to burn through all your karma, and you take on as a frontrunner soul, you take on quite a bit. You burn through all your karma, and then the higher self comes in, gives you heart activation, and you begin the process of fully integrating with your higher self at that time, which can't happen until you burn through all your karma, and you burn through all the suppressed emotion, right? Then and only then can the higher self come in, grant you heart activation, and then start to really accelerate your vibration, start to infuse the body with light, and ultimately lead you to the end goal, which is to embody the next evolution of humanity. And this is the version of humanity that's required to move into the kind of 5D Earth that everybody talks about and dreams about and yearns for. So we'll go into some of the signs that you are a frontrunner soul, and it's sort of similar to getting boxed in by your karma and what I call the vibrational vice grip. And they're all slightly different. They're all nuanced slightly differently, but they can all be essentially because you have chosen this path of burning through this karma, being a frontrunner and undergoing this transformation. There are many advanced souls on the planet, but none so much as the frontrunner. The frontrunner is the toughest soul that there is. It's the frontrunner is the toughest soul on the planet. They're the most advanced. They take on the most karma. They deal with the most pain, the most suffering, the most loss, the most tragedy, the most absolute annihilation and devastation of their lives. If you're a frontrunner, that means that you've had the hardest time trying to create your reality through life. It also means that you may have tried, the whole manifestation path and route. And I'm not being dismissive to manifestation because it's real. But if you're burning through karma, and you're trying to manifest, excuse my language, but it's like pissing into the wind. Nothing's going to happen. You're just going to frustrate yourself. For many frontrunners, the absolute best thing they can do is to land on their dharma, which is a path of sort of fulfilling your karma by doing some sort of service type job that you might not necessarily love, but you wind up being really good at it, if that makes any sense. So you're not living your dream, but you're having a decent life. Now, I don't want to create limitation and make it seem like you're doomed to this, because you're not. If you're a frontrunner, then you'll eventually, if you continue to do the work, you'll eventually get to a place where you break through and you break free. And, the end result of being a front runner during these times is heaven on earth, manifesting the life of your dreams. That's the end result. But the problem is you have to be able to survive the onslaught of all your karma and burning through all that to get to that place. And it's no easy thing. For many front runners, are caught it's kind of like a really vicious, brutal Groundhog Day where things seem to just repeat over and over and over and over again. And your problems continue to loop. And it seems like no matter how much work you do on yourself, it just doesn't move the needle. And the thing is that there is an ending to it where you break free, you break through and you break free, but you have to keep going. You have to keep doing the work. You have to keep doing the emotional integration work. You have to keep meditating, doing meditation. You have to keep, doing your morning routine. You have to stay focused, stay on track. Eventually you will break through, but it's just that you have to persevere much, much longer than the average person, does in order to break free. The real controversial part is that you signed up for this. And it's sort of like, victim blaming to say that, and understanding reincarnation and understanding, the karmic cycle and that we're always trying to balance karma. We're always trying to do a better job. We're always trying to burn through stuff. We're trying to balance karma with things we may have perpetrated against another person in the past life or they against us, etc. But if you're a front runner, your job essentially is to just stay strong, stay focused, develop a morning routine to keep you centered and grounded. And if you don't know what a morning routine is, just listen to my other episode on the morning routine. Write down what I call a template, which is the life of your dreams. And, you can write it down in present tense or however you want to write it down. And you want to read that every morning. And that keeps you going. That keeps you motivated because it is possible for you to have the life of your dreams. It is possible. You just have to keep going. You have to weather the storm. And if you're a front runner, it's not just a storm, it's many storms. Part of the hell of being a front runner is that there's nobody you can really turn to talk to. Everybody's there's almost, unless other front runners or other people who've been through a lot of suffering and they're just burning through a lot of karma. One of the big problems is the isolation because you go to tell somebody and they're going to just project trite crap onto you. You're going, well, at least you're still here. At least you keep trying. People don't have the capacity to hear or listen to what you've gone through if you're a front runner. They don't have any sort of capacity for being present and actually hearing and listening to all the things you got to. You're not going to get the validation that you want. You're not going to be validated. That's really just one of the most isolating, suffering, miserable parts of it is that eventually you'll realize you just can't tell people because they'll project trite crap onto you. Or they'll ask questions like, well, have you been to a doctor? Or, what do you think is the problem? And suddenly you realize they aren't listening to you at all. They're just a surface level. They're just operating a surface level program, and they can't hold space for you to actually express yourself without coming back with something just so dismissive and diminishing and trite. And you just realize, oh my God, and you walk away from these interactions feeling very diminished and depleted. And so as a front runner, you start to just kind of keep to yourself and you become a little more isolated. You talk to people a little less. And, it's at the end of the day, this is for the best because you do the best work on yourself in isolation. And you want to really get through this thing as quick as you possibly can. You don't want to take, I know if you're going through any of this, then I know you don't want it to last a fraction of a second longer than it possibly has to, right? And so sometimes comfort or seeking comfort becomes the enemy of the front runner because they have to face all this stuff. And facing it really means a lot of times, unfortunately, being by yourself in isolation. So you don't comfort seek or project your emotional problems onto the person next to you or your partner or whatever. They don't have to bear the brunt of your karma because ultimately you have to face it yourself anyway. So all you'll end up doing is kind of wearing down your relationship until they can't handle it anymore and they eventually leave or something happens like that. It's happened to many, many front runners. I've had, I'm in circles where there are literally thousands of people coming to me on and off here and there, asking me questions or telling me their stories. And I can tell you they all have a lot of things in common. They all eventually wind up and just, by themselves, sort of isolated and just, kind of trying to survive because of just the sheer weight and magnitude. Now, I don't want this episode to be a downer. I'm not wanting it to be this kind of sort of spiral into these low vibrations as much as I want it to validate those of you who may have gone through this. So, you're not alone. It's not just, I'm not just, incapable or whatever, or, I don't know. It's not my inability. It's what I'm going through. It's the program that I'm on, and it's happening for a reason. And so again, your mission is just to get through it, do the work. This isn't a passive sport. You can't just sit there and hope that it ends. You need to be doing that inner work. You need to be doing the meditation, do your morning routine, write down your goals and dreams, read them every day, do all the things that you can while you're in this process, and try not to project your problems on other people, because it's just going to, that you're just going to wear through relationships because people won't be able to handle what you're going through. If this is you, right? So, so I think the thing to remember is that there is a reward for you at the end of this. There is a life unimaginable to you. If you are somebody who's in this, then there is a life that's unimaginable to you, a life of your dreams, a good life waiting for you at the other end of this. And your only objective is just to keep going and do the best you can and know that eventually you're going to get through this. So that's it for this episode. Take the best care of yourself, keep going, and we'll talk to you soon. If this episode resonated with what you're moving through and you're interested in private spiritual coaching around awakening, emotional integration, shadow work, relationships, boundaries, or building a soul-led life and business, email me directly at rc101coaching@gmail.com with the word coaching in the subject line. You can also find the contact link in the show notes. Follow Awaken Sovereignty for future episodes and share this with someone moving through their own awakening. This is Chris Pinckley. Stay awake, stay aligned, stay sovereign.